What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Let me put my goggles down here before I talk to you. So we are out on the YFZ, as you can see, and I was sitting here taking a break, and I was thinking about, man, all the years I've been on sport quads and the different sport quads I've ridden, and it got me thinking of a cool topic. Like, what's your sport quad story? If you ride sport quads, what started it for you? Like, what got you, what drew you in? What attracted you to start riding sport quads? Were you a dirt bike guy first and then you went to four-wheelers? Or did you grow up when I did? And I was a young man in the late 80s, 90s, early 2000s, when they were just at their peak of popularity. And I will tell you, I figured I will share with you my story, and you guys can share your story in the comments below. Tell me how you got started into sport quads. What drew you in? Maybe you're a younger rider right now, and you've just gotten drawn into the sport, you know, watching guys on YouTube like myself, Pete, Mike Sabo, Jackson Offroad, all the guys, Brewers, Dad Speed. There's so many guys making sport quad content now. So maybe that's what started you. You're a young guy now, and that's awesome if that's the case, to get a new generation to ride the sport. But I think a lot of you is probably my age. I'm 49 and got started in the 80s, with your interest. So for me, I'll tell you my story, and it may be similar to some of yours, maybe not, but I'm really curious. Share below in the comments. Tell me your story. I try to respond to everybody, and it's cool discussion to have, I think. So for me personally, it started, I was about probably, I want to say maybe 12 years old. I was born in 77, so it was probably late 80s. It had to be like 88, 89. I remember my uncle was a builder on Long Island. He built 2 houses, and at one point my family and I were going to move next door. We were going to buy one of the houses he was building. And I remember going there with my father and being in the backyard, and he was grading the backyard. And doing that, he had, old school chain link fence rolled up with a chain, and it was hooked to a 3-wheeler. And it was a family friend's 3-wheeler. I think it was a 350X. Could have been a 250X. This gentleman I'm speaking of had several of them. He had a few 3-wheelers at the time. And I remember standing there. My dad's talking to my uncle, and I'm standing there with my cousin, and it was just parked there. And I remember just looking at the front end of it, with the headlight and the way the forks looked, and just the tires. And I had never seen nothing like it, And I was like, man, this is something else. I was instantly hooked to this. At that point, there was nothing else I would think about other than 3-wheelers, ATVs at the time. Sport quads were around then. But all that stuff, I just couldn't. That's all. I was buying Dirt Wheels magazines. I was just reading it. There was no internet back then, so it was if somebody you knew had something, or you had magazines. That was it. The Blackwater 100 or whatever race it was, the Blackwater 200, I don't remember the number. But everybody is familiar, if you're my age, with the Blackwater that they did race. And that was always a big thing. That was really cool. So it was just really cool time. And I remember begging my parents, I want one. And they were like, no way, we're not buying you a 3-wheeler. And then my neighbor at the time, fast forward maybe a year and a half later, we ended up living somewhere else. We didn't buy that house right next door to my uncle. My neighbor across the street, I'm maybe 14 at the time now. So it's a few years later. Across the street from me, this guy Bobby, he was a little older. He had a 87 or an 86, the last year of the ATC 250R. And it was really clean. He had bought it, original owner, and he hadn't ridden it in years. Like, he'd take it out once in a while to make sure it ran. Take it up the block and park it right back in the garage. He never rode it. And my cousin, with my uncle, the same people I was just referring to. He came over. My neighbor was going to sell it, and I told him about it. He wanted one. He bought it. At that point, they had a property up in Pennsylvania, farmhouse, and we'd go up there, for weekend getaways or, just small vacations. And we do riding up there. So he would have his three-wheeler, and then the family friend had their three-wheelers up there. The 350X was a 200 and a 250X, I think. There was three of them. They had super trap exhausts on them, if you guys remember those. They were just really cool. And I would ride those around the fields and on the property. And I was just hooked, man. And so at that point, I was like, I just started really hounding my parents to buy me one. So they wouldn't buy me a three-wheel. They were going to buy me a four-wheeler. Kid I went to school with used to ride past my house every day on it. He had an 86 Honda 4Trax 250X. It was gray. It had those round fenders. It was the precursor to the 300EX. 300EX was built off the 250X. Nothing like the 250X is now. This thing was a legit offering back then. Kick start only, no electric start. Round fenders, red hood, red seats, had 4 tracks on it. Really cool machine. I'll put a picture up on the screen. So he was going to sell it to buy a project car that he was going to restore. So my parents bought me that. So they bought that for me. Had ball tires in the back. They bought me a set of Douglas rims that Christmas with a set of Turf Tamers tires on it. And man, I rode the hell out of that thing. Every weekend, my cousin who had bought that three-wheeler now was riding a Banshee. He had a Quadzilla prior to that, but he had gotten hooked on the Banshees. So he had a couple Banshees. So he would pick me up. He was a few years older than me, so he drove. He had a pickup truck. He'd come to my house, stand up the Banshee, put my 250X behind it, and we'd go down to this town, Yaphank, several towns away from where I lived, about 20-minute ride. And there was a big area like sand pit, a bunch of trails in the back. That it was private property, but it wasn't being developed. It was a developer owned it, and he didn't care that anybody rode there, because he wasn't developing the property at that time. And we would go ride every weekend. And to this day, for me, I hear music on the radio that was from back then. It's like a time capsule. It brings me right back to that moment of those weekends riding with my cousin, who unfortunately these days I don't talk to anymore. You guys know how that stuff goes. But it brings me right back to those moments. So it's really cool, things like that, how you mentally just never forget. I can remember the smell of all the race gas and the fuel and just the exhaust and the two-stroke oil in the air, because everybody would go there and ride. I mean, I'd have my 250X. There'd be the guy there with a Kawasaki Mojave 250s, the Quad Sport 230s, and it would just be like a rivalry, of all like the mid-bore 250-ish four strokes, and who had the better one and stuff. And it was just really cool time. Everybody was chill. We would ride together, check out each other's machines. It was awesome, man. I miss those days. So for me, that's how it all started. And then I sold that machine after owning it a few years to buy my first car. And then for a few years, I didn't have a sport quad. I got back into it, bought my first brand new machine, which was a It was a Suzuki LTZ 400, and I believe it was a 2006. It was when it got all the fresh upgrades, the better shocks, the gusseted, had some frame changes. Whatever year that was, it was like 2006 or 07. It was white with the blue seat and the blue graphics. It was a beautiful machine. So I had that for a while. Awesome. And then the itch started. That's when it all started for me, with like buying and selling and trying different things. From that, I bought a Polaris Outlaw 500. That was when they introduced the IRS. And I was riding with a bunch of 4x4 quads at that time, because that place, sport quad area on Long Island, was dead. There was nowhere to ride. New York is just that way, if you guys are familiar with the area. We didn't do street takeovers back then. Well, you go out, and if it snowed and the streets were covered with snow, back then the police didn't bother you. You just, you drove around respectively in the snow. But, there was no crazy stuff going on back then, and there was no areas to ride. So we would trailer to off-road parks in Jersey, not Jersey, but Pennsylvania. Lost Trails was a place called Paragon back then. There was a bunch of places, and that got old. It was 4-hour ride, trailering it through the city to get out to Pennsylvania or upstate New York, somewhere to ride all day, trailer all the way back home, get home real late, exhausted, You know, we were young then, so it wasn't that bad, but it just got old. So I ended up not having quad for a while. Years later, we moved out here to Arizona, and then you guys know the story. Pretty much started my channel getting a 700. I mean, this channel was going before that, but it kind of picked up when I got my 700 Raptor 5 years ago. And that's it, man. I've been on sport quad since. I will probably always have one, even if I get to the point where I'm barely riding it. I'll just always have it in the garage just to get it out once in a while for the nostalgia, even when I get too old. So that's my sport quad story. That's how I got into it. I'm sure it's similar for a lot of you guys, I'll bet. But everybody's got their own unique story, so I would love to hear them. Leave a comment below. Tell me your sport quad story. And let's start a conversation. Let's chat. Let's share, you know. It's an awesome sport. Let's keep it going. And save sport quads. This is Joe Dallas, the off-road guys. I really appreciate you watching and listening to my story. Share your stories in the comments below, and we'll catch you on the next one.